Oh, this is just not fun. Like, no part of this is enjoyable. Things I do for YouTube reviews. Whew. All right, let's do this. Hello everyone, thanks for coming outside me today. So today, it's actually a fair weather day, and by fair weather I mean the sky is just blue. We still have about 10 inches of snow here on the ground in PA. About a 17 to 18 mile an hour wind according to Google, and the real feel is about 16 degrees. So even though it's a very balmy beach-like temperature, I figured I would come out and actually test some products out. So we're testing Huntworth out. We're testing out some other gear as well, and one of them today is the XV REST from Schaffer Archery Solutions. So we're going to give this a whirl here today, right out of Minnesota, made and manufactured here in the United States, which is pretty cool. That's kind of a big kick, obviously, and I prefer to have my rest and my bows and my strings, in particular, the meat and potatoes of the whole system of archery, to be USA made. So this is an Elite Energy 35 that I've got it hitched on right now. I'm shooting with the Bohning nose button and no peep. So let's go through the specifications of this arrow rest, what exactly it's used for, and what I've had as an experience so far shooting this rest both indoors and out. So first things first, this is a cable activated rest, and it also can be a cable actuated rest, just like a ripcord and just like a QAD HDX. So you can shoot this, and I'll use the activation cord here. You can shoot this and it will pull up and scissor. So it's not a forked drop away like a ripcord, a QAD, or a Hamskea. It's actually a scissors, and they actually slide in and out of the way as you draw and release the bow. Now, other rests that are kind of similar to this in terms of not just a forked drop away probably would be the Trophy Ridge. They had, I think it was called the Revolution, and it was actually like a big C, and it actually sat cocked over both sides of the arrow, top and bottom, and then when it was activated, it twisted and the arrow passed through the gap in between. That didn't go over so well. This one I much rather prefer because it's still kind of got that sliding gait to it as it goes back and forth. Schaffer claims it's rated up to 418 feet a second, which of course most hunting bows in particular are shooting well under 300, so plenty of clearance there. Like I said, it can be either cable activated, means that as you draw, it'll pull up and then cradle the arrow in the top part of the V when it's actually together, or it can be cable actuated, meaning you can set it, put the pin in, and then let go, and it'll actually hold it, and it'll keep the arrow from falling out. And we'll demonstrate this later as we go on to shoot. Then as you draw, it will obviously tighten, release, and then it'll fly out of the way as the actual arrow is shot. Man, that wind is brutal. Whew. What an unenjoyable day to be outside. With the bright blue skies and the full sun and everything, that's why I'm wearing shades. I've given up the ability to see with my regular glasses just to put on my my dad shades here, just so I can see, period. Whew. Rest setup and instructions are very basic, very straightforward, just like any other cable activated or actuated rest. You serve it into the down cable. It does not come with a football clamp like you might see with a QAD rest. You actually have to serve this in here, and I wouldn't trust a football clamp anyway. There's a lot of tension to be put on to get these gates to open and close with the spring mechanisms on the inside. So I'd much rather have it served in anyway. If you have a bow press, obviously that becomes super simple. So setting this rest up for me was very easy. If you don't have a bow press, you're gonna either have to get creative or take it to your local shop and they can help you out. Getting it mounted to the riser was super simple. They actually make different mounting plates for specific bow manufacturers. They don't make one specific for Elite, so I just use the universal mount. And quite frankly, no issues with it whatsoever. Just eyeballed it straight. They have multiple gang adjustment holes, so that way you can get the most amount of play out of every single bow that you could possibly mount this to, which is nice. Not very many rest manufacturers have that. Hamskea does, which is one of the reasons why I love their rest so much, is that if you've got a burger button hole that's really low or one that's really high, or just the way that the rest is going to tune, you need as much windage as possible, both up and down and left and right. You get that type of play, and you get that with the Schaffer, which is really nice to see. You have all metal construction, which is pretty much, if you expect to have a rest in this price point, in that $130 to $150 price range, you expect it to have all metal construction. The arms themselves are a polymer, which actually is kind of nice. I don't mind them being a polymer compared to a, let's say like a metal blade type system. Most polymer systems exist on dropaway rests these days. QAD is a type of plastic, ripcord's a type of plastic, as well as Hamskea even is a rubber over molded a thin aluminum or steel. So having the plastic molded fingers here as the swing gates, I have no problems with. And in the event that you have an issue with the rest and it doesn't fire, it's much better to take vanes off of the plastic than it is off of metal. You're gonna get much more give. So let's do a demonstration here in terms of loading this. So this is just your standard, this is a standard Victory Arrow V4 standard diameter. I've shot it also with a 166 as well as with a 2116 aluminum. You're not gonna shoot it with much bigger of an aluminum after that because it has to get to a certain point in order to engage the locking mechanism. If you want to shoot a larger aluminum arrow or something like that, you're going to have to shoot this as cable activated only, not cable actuated, because you're not going to be able to lock it in place with the jaws completely closed. This is a standard diameter arrow though, 245 from Victory. It's not a problem, and I'm shooting zingers. Now you have to shoot this rest with the cock vane down, which is very different than most dropaways on the market these days. QAD, Ripcord, Hamskea, they're all going to be cock vane up. This one's cock vane down. So that's a new thing to keep in mind. And the instructions were very clear on this. I'll stop and say this now. The instructions for this rest were all printed out in 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, very specific instructions. And kudos to Schaffer on doing that. Sometimes you just buy a dropaway and they just kind of assume you know how to assemble it if you do it yourself. And if you don't know how to do it yourself, sometimes you could put things on in a wrong direction or not know how to set tension or so on and so forth. The instructions here were very, very simple, very easy to follow, and I had this rest up and running in no time. Hello, Mr. Helicopter. So I can shoot this rest by drawing it back and it would scissor together and push the arrow all the way up to the top. But I personally love the idea of having it be a cable actuated, which means I just have to pull down there, push in the pin, and now the arrow cannot fall out. Neither the 166 or the 204 or 245 here that I tried was able to fall out. So that's very nice. Usually you have to have some sort of containment arm, obviously, either from Hamskea's cage. QED has a little L-shaped arm, and so does Ripcord. There's nothing up here to kind of monkey around and get stuff stuck in, so that's really nice. It just holds the arrow in regardless of which direction you have it. The other really nice thing about this is how you know if you've drawn it back to full length when you've actually got this thing set up. And you can see it here with this actual interior pin. When it's ready, it will actually pop straight out and it faces you so you can see it. So now that it's popped out, it will actually activate the rest of the way. If you don't actually do that and you don't actually get it popped out, let's say you only draw it so far, you don't apply enough tension, that pin won't pop. And if that pin doesn't pop out, then you know that you haven't drawn it back far enough. That pin needs to pop out. There's no noise to it whatsoever, but you can visually see it on the back side of the bow. That's one of the biggest complaints I have with rests like Ripcord and QAD is that they have the witness marks over on the side to ensure that you're actually getting it. And it's a lot of monkeying around the drawboard, making sure it gets right, because you don't want to accidentally send an arrow through the launcher and potentially break off an arm or two. With this pin being on the back side and it's an automatic feedback, you know that you're actually going to get vane clearance when you shoot the bow. Now, of course, the downside to this is just like a ripcord, unlike a QAD HDX, the ripcord, once you sear it over, it's going to fall down out of the way when you let down if you have to in a hunting situation. The same thing's true here with the Schaffer XV. It's going to open the gates, the scissoring is going to open and let the arrow actually pass through because it thinks it's being shot. Now, the nice thing about this compared to a forked thing that's laying down is now even though you've let down, it still can't fall out, right? Because the gates there, you have to, as you can see, do some serious monkeying around to get that arrow to come out of the bow, which it's not going to do with just a simple letdown. And I'll demonstrate all of these here in a second when I actually go to shoot it. So I've continued to film yesterday, but the footage all looked and sounded like this. Because apparently wireless mic systems and weather in the teens just don't really agree, or at least my system doesn't. So we'll have to revamp that for the future. But it is the next day. Here we are, still here with the Schaffer XV, now in my basement, and I'm sitting down so I can fit and shoot appropriately. I want to just kind of shoot some of these shots here and talk a little bit about some of the cautions that I have with the rest, or the negatives, if you will, although they're not negatives because nothing has presented itself. There is one thing, though, that is bugging me a little bit, and I'm going to shoot these half dozen arrows here and kind of talk through some of them. I will say, though, having that pin right there on the backside, being able to see that as a physical representation is pretty legit. This target's only about 4 feet away. So in terms of functionality, and like there's no noise with it, right? So sometimes with certain rests like the QAD or the ripcord, when the arms and the fingers drop down, it can be a real loud ping as it kind of hits the aluminum of the riser, and that can be kind of annoying. This, of course, it's all contained to itself, so you don't get that. However, since everything is out and exposed here on the front, it is not a sealed system. So one of the big things I like about Hamskea in particular is that all the bearings are sealed. Even if it's the Trinity, you have a third bearing on the opposite end of the arm, and it's sealed as well. This here, it's all wide open and exposed. And I'll zoom in here in a second. Let me shoot this arrow. You can see there are all the springs of the launcher arms there. Everything is exposed. The stainless steel rods, everything exposed. Now, I don't expect anything to get in there and rust per se, but what I do possibly expect is that there might be debris that falls in there. Now, it would be pretty easy to clean out. Springs are pretty wide grooved. It's not a sloppy tolerance by any means, but it definitely would be able to blow out with like a can of compressed air or something like that, or even taking a little polymer brush to it, like a gun cleaning brush. But I've never had a rest that I've had to do that with. So getting moisture stuck in there, getting debris and stuff stuck in there, it's not something I would have to deal with a QAD, a Hamskea, or ripcord, or anything like that. So that's a little bit unique and different. But it's just the nature of the beast. And again, you know, you get the ability for the arrow not to fall out even when it's not at full cock. So that's pretty good. Now, my biggest gripe and biggest complaint that I have with this is that it's hitting me in the back of the hand. Let me finish off these arrows here, and I'll show you. Right there. Right there. You see that red mark? That's where it's hitting me, right in the back of the hand. It's not a painful, but it is a pressure, and it's every single shot, no matter how I grip or what angle I'm positioned at. And that is partially due to, I think, the rest fault, but also maybe because of the height of the burger button hole. Either way, this whole housing, because of the arms, the scissoring action and the location of everything is up so high on the actual rest itself that this entire cage portion is dropped down. Let me show you on a Hamskea what it would look like. So here you have the Hamskea Trinity, which is the exact same issue. You have this cage that comes down real close to the back of your hand. And when you're actually holding the bow and shoot the bow, and you can Google this, there's actually a lot of people that have had hand contact issue with the Trinity based on the arrow cage. So I've actually removed it. I put it back on for the sake of this video. But both for the Trinity and the Hybrid Hunter, I have taken off the containment cage, which means I could potentially have an arrow start flopping around in a hunting situation, but it allows me to have all of that hand clearance. Can't get that with the Schaffer because that's the whole body, right? That's the whole mounting plate there on the bottom. That is the actual part of the rest. It's not just a containment arm. It's actually where all of the rods and the springs are located, and you can't move it. So that was a little bit of a bummer. Your mileage may vary, and again, based on just where everything is located in regards to the burger button hole, you might be able to raise this or lower it. But if it's even lower than this, I'd really be afraid that you would get some serious hand contact and not even be able to put your hand into the grip properly. And the Elites are known for having a really low grip. I mean, this is really low down on the riser and gives you a lot of general hand clearance. But with this Schaffer, I'm getting it. So it's not a complete and utter deal breaker. It's not as powerful with the touching as it is on every shot. But it is something of an annoyance, and I quite frankly don't want my bow to annoy me when I shoot. But anyways, that's all for this video. I'm going to keep shooting this rest here for a while, see if I can figure out the hand position, maybe do an update video or maybe an update post on social media, Facebook or Instagram. And speaking of which, if you don't follow me over on those platforms, I highly recommend you go check me out. That's a great way to contact me if you have any questions about the Schaffer XV or any other rest or any other type of archery equipment. Be happy to help you out. You can also follow my email, which is in the description below, averagearchery@gmail.com. Hope you're able to get outside, enjoy the sport of archery hunting. If you so choose, definitely enjoy God's beautiful creation. I really hope it's warmer where you are, and we'll get to see you next time.